I discovered the moment in my week, really in every day, that I'm going to refer to as my most me moment. I don't know what yours is. Maybe get it in your head at this point. It's that time of the day where you're just you. Nothing attached, no act to play, no what's the right thing to say. I'm just me. For me, my most me moment are the first 59 seconds of the day when I wake up. That's it, right? When the crust is still in my eyes and my breath is still dragon breath and my hair is every which way and I'm not really thinking about anything. That's when I'm my most me, right? You're not on one end of the spectrum, or you're not political, liberal, or conservative. You're not a Cubs fan, Sox fan. You're not any of those things. You're just there, right? That's kind of a good moment, but it's a fleeting one, isn't it? Like, it doesn't last long. Like I said, for me, it's about 59 seconds, because we all know that it's not long before you have to get dressed. And I don't just mean physically, I mean like from an identity standpoint. It's your uniform for the day, the different parts that you play, right? And some of us have 3 or 4 uniforms that we have to put on every day. And all of a sudden that most me moment is gone, and we're our most whatever it is that we're doing for the day kind of moment. So for some of us, and we're celebrating you today because moms are awesome, but for some of us that uniform is, I gotta be a mom. And a lot of you are like, I wish I could get 59 seconds to just be me, but mine wake me up every morning at the crack of dawn, right? And I don't know what the uniform looks like for you, but it's this, I've got to provide, I've got to comfort, I've got to be there, I can't really worry about me. Moms are incredible in that way. They don't worry about themselves a whole lot. And that never really changes, right? Like, if you're a mom of really young kids, you talk today to a mom of really old kids, and they'll tell you, you never stop worrying about your kids. You just never get to take that uniform off. But not all of us are moms. So some of us, the uniform is that of a business person, right? It's the button-up shirt with the tie, jacket, briefcase. You look official. Right? Like that, you've got to put that on, you've got to go do that thing, and there are moments throughout your day where you're in a meeting or you're giving a presentation or a discussion in the hallway where you're going, this is just not me. But it pays the bills, right? Others of us, it's the role of a friend. We've got to put that uniform on. We're kind of carrying so-and-so these days. They're going through a rough patch, or they're sleeping on our couch, or whatever the case may be, right? Like, you get a few seconds of you, and then it's always shifting into these other things that you do every single day. So on second 60 of your day, you are hit with the crushing reality of what I'm going to call severe everydayness. Right? Like, there's no getting away from this. Every day has an element of everydayness. Like, I did it yesterday, and the day before, and the day before, and I'm going to do it tomorrow and the day after that as well. There's just these parts of us that we've got to do. And we call them mundane. We call them ordinary. It's just us doing life, right? We wake up in the morning, and even though we know about this, we still wish or pray for something special today. right? Have you ever found yourself saying something like this to God in the first few moments of your day? Like, God, if you could give something extra today just to remind me that life is good and that I could write in my journal that something exciting happened today. Like, can I have a special day today? There's no shame in that. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem is, though, we usually get to the last 60 seconds of our day and we feel frustrated and we feel disappointed and angry, maybe even slightly depressed because there's just no getting around this. Every day has everydayness. And it feels like often they're just the same thing over and over again. The problem is we can't change our circumstances, right? Like you can't get up tomorrow and go, you know what, I want today to be a different day, so I'm going to quit my job. You can't do that. You have bills to pay. Parents, you can't just decide, I'm not going to be a parent today. You can get in trouble for doing things like that. You can't decide, I'm not going to get dressed. Again, you get in trouble for not doing things like that. Right? Like, our lives are what they are, and to some degree, we feel like there's nothing we can do about it. Because we're grown-ups. And grown-ups do grown-up things. That's just the way it is, right? I mean, how many times did your parents say to you when you were growing up, like, well, in the real world, this is just life. You grow up to be whatever you want, but probably not. That's kind of how it is. And we feel like we can't change that. Everything feels like it's so ordinary and so mundane. And our story, like I hear from so many people that are interested in being baptized, that have been Christians maybe for a long time, they'll say to me, I don't want to share my story because it's not exciting. Nothing miraculous happened. Like, I didn't meet Jesus in the middle of the road. I wasn't at my lowest point. I've just kind of been a Christian my whole life, right? Like, we put these value statements on our stories, and the most average ones we kind of shove to the back of the shelf. But what I want to challenge you with today is the notion that we've got the wrong approach, because Jesus, the author and perfecter of our faith and our Savior and the God of all things, Jesus himself, used all of the time the most mundane, ordinary stories to teach people about extraordinary truths. Over and over again, when you watch Jesus teach, he will point to things that people take for granted. And so what I want to do today is look at one of these times where he points at something that everybody walked by 100 times in a day and didn't think twice about, but used that mundane story to teach an extraordinary truth. Because maybe, just maybe, there's something in that approach for you and I to live every day with. So Jesus is kind of in the middle of his ministry, and people are coming from all over the place to listen to him teach, including the religious leaders that always had issues with him. I mean, they couldn't wait to trip Jesus up. And so they start pushing on some of the people that he's hanging out with, what I would call very ordinary people. This is how it goes down. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to hear Jesus teach. So not just the religious leaders, but also these sinners, is what Luke says. Now, when I hear the word sinners, I have like one bracket or one bucket that I put sinners in, right? You just think like bad. Most of us, when we hear the word sin, we think it's something bad. We're not always sure what it is, but we know it's bad. And usually it's people that don't go to church. It's usually people that say bad words and watch bad movies, right? Like those are sinners. Like that's the one bucket. But religious people of the day who would point at these individuals that Jesus hung out with and call them sinners, or even when Luke calls them sinners, they usually fell into three different categories. We have one, they had three. So it was really easy to be labeled a sinner back in the day. For instance, immorality was one of them. You could just be blatantly immoral. And we don't argue with that one. That one doesn't surprise us. Like, if you're an immoral person, you are a sinner, right? That's just how it is. And they did the same thing. But there was another category, and that was your occupation. And some of the occupations we would guess, right? The like prostitution thing and tax collectors and the things you did. But there were all kinds of jobs that the religious people of the day looked at and went, that's not holy. That's not righteous. That's not aimed at God enough. You're a sinner. They just love to throw that at people. And then lastly, commoners, like just normal village citizens that were inconsistent in their adherence to the oral tradition. Because remember, the religious leaders not just had the Jewish scriptures or our Old Testament, they added to it. There were rules about the rules. And there were rules about those rules too, and it was just very complicated, and it was very easy to miss dotting an I or crossing a T. And if you did, you were a sinner. So here's how I look at it. For the religious leaders of that day, virtually everyone was a sinner except them. Everybody else was sinful and wrong, and good religious Jewish people, they should not hang out with broken people. Now, if everybody is a sinner in their minds, then that's just ordinary, right? That's most everybody. And these are the people that Jesus hung out with the most. When he gets hooked up with Matthew, right? He wrote one of the Gospels. He was called Levi back in the day. He goes over to Matthew's house for dinner. And he hangs out with all the tax collectors and all the other sinners. And what's interesting is Luke refers to them as notorious sinners. So it's not just like they had secret sins that everybody assumed were there. Everybody knew them as these people. They are so far from God, and they are so broken, and they are so messed up, immoral, bad jobs, and they forget the law all the time. These are the people that Jesus hung out with. The normal people. The people just like you and just like me. So not only does he tell stories about normal people, he hangs out with ordinary, run-of-the-mill, take them for granted kind of folks. This makes the Pharisees angry, Luke goes on to say. So it says, this made the Pharisees and teachers of religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. I love that Luke puts that exclamation there. He associated with them and he even ate with them. Now, we don't think twice about eating with people. But in this day, if you ate with someone, it was a sign of acceptance. It was a sign of fellowship. And this idea that Jesus associated with them means he decided to hang out with them. It's not like he was just hanging out and they showed up. You know those kind of people that just show up and you're not even sure how they got there or thought that they were invited. That's not the case. Jesus says, no, I would like to hang out with you. I would like to have dinner with you. I would like to get to know you and your story. This is not what messiahs do. This is not what saviors do. This is not what great rabbis do. Jesus says, no, all of you ordinary folks, I choose to hang out with you. And I'm going to eat with you to show everybody that we have a relationship. That you're not far from me. There's not a gap. There's not a wall. There's you, there's me here at the table together. Jesus ran with ordinary people. Just look at the disciples. Tax collector, fishermen, all kinds of just ordinary, get up in the morning, rub the crust out of their eyes, put on their uniform that is their life, and go about doing it. This is who Jesus hung out with. But because everybody's so up in arms about it, Jesus has some explaining to do, right? Like if you are the Messiah and you are who you say you are, God in the flesh, then you got to explain why you are hanging out with them. And so what you would expect Jesus to do, being the great teacher he is, right? It would probably be to roll out a TV like this with a great keynote presentation. And he's going to just lay it out and argue these guys into the ground and prove once and for all that he's superior to them. And it would be very calculated. But that's not what Jesus did at all. And Jesus never did. It's one of the things that people found so maddening about him. Because here's what Jesus does. It says, so Jesus told them a story. And I imagine everybody around is like, did he miss the question? You're going to tell a story? Well, like I said, he does this all the time. In fact, right here, he's about to tell 3 different stories about one idea. One right after the other. He's going to tell the one we're going to look at, then he talks about a coin for a while, and then he talks about this son who takes his inheritance and runs off. We call it the prodigal son, right? He tells this story 3 times over. And each version of the story is about something that people would understand. And so he starts in. It says, so Jesus told them a story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? And everybody goes, okay, he kind of missed the question that we were asking. And now, Jesus, why are you talking about sheep? We didn't ask you about sheep. We asked you about people, specifically these people. Why are you going to go on about sheep? And I think Jesus looked at them and went, because you get sheep. You obviously don't get people. But you get sheep. You understand sheep. Why? Because sheep are a part of your everyday life. You see sheep all of the time. In fact, sheep did 3 specific things for everybody in that day and age. And they all knew this. They would interact with sheep day in and day out because sheep would give them sustenance. In other words, food and milk and beverage. Like this is how they nourished themselves, was from sheep. So every day they're interacting with them. They also provided shelter. They would take the hide, and this is what they would build their tents out of. So every day that they went to bed under a roof of sorts, they'd go, sheep. They just knew sheep. And then finally, the sacrifice. Every time they went to the temple to make atonement for their sin, they would bring a sheep. They knew sheep. Everybody got sheep. And so Jesus, in his brilliance, instead of pulling out a flip chart and drawing diagrams, goes, I'm going to talk about something that you understand. And everybody goes, understand? There's nothing to understand. It's just part of our everyday life. It's normal. It's ordinary. It's mundane. Jesus goes, but let's get to the point here. And he continues on with his story. He says, won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go to search for the one that's lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he'll joyfully carry it home on his shoulders. And then, get this, when he arrives, he'll call together his friends and neighbors, saying, rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep. And everybody listening goes, yeah, you're right. That's exactly how it would go. In fact, my cousin lost one of his sheep just last week, and he went on a crazy scavenger hunt to find that thing. And he carried it home, and we had a great party when he got back. And everybody's going, yeah, I got a story just like that. Why? Because this happens all the time. Just like the things in your life happen all the time. This is the most run-of-the-mill normal story that anybody's ever told. In fact, most people go, this isn't even a story, Jesus. This is a description of events that occur all the time. And that's exactly why Jesus does it. Because he uses words or phrases that indicate he's bringing people along for the journey. If you noticed in his story, he says a few things that give it away. He says something like, what will he do? And the reason he asks the question, what will he do, is because you know the answer. If a shepherd loses a sheep, what will he do? He'll go find it. Now, everybody's a part of the story. And then he says, won't he? And the reason he says, won't he, is because you already know he will. He doesn't have to convince you. He doesn't have to draw you a picture. You already know that this is what that shepherd is going to do. And then he says, finally, he will. Of course he will. You know he will. Because it's just normal. And this is important to me because I think so often the most normal parts of our life are the most dismissed parts of our life. And if you would have gone to any shepherd in that day and age and gone, do you think there's anything special about your life? They'd all go, no. In fact, nobody wanted my job. I'm the youngest in my family, so that's why they make me do it. Do you think there's anything important to learn from your job? No. Nobody cares. Do you think God might be revealing something about himself in your life And they'd go, have you seen my life? I literally sit out in a field with animals all day. And yet, this is the story that Jesus tells. This is the life that Jesus highlights, the mundane one. And what he does next is so amazing. Because the next words out of his mouth are, in the same way. You get this story. You get this shepherd. You get these sheep. You've already made the case for something. And in this common story is about to be put some cosmic truth. And what's so cool is that you will never, ever forget it. So it's like an analogy from school. If this works, then this works too. And he says, in the same way, he goes on, he says, there is more joy in heaven. Not a field, not a shepherd's house. Now we're talking about heaven. There's more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. Now I'm going to tell you the truth, just a little inside look of my brain and how it works. This part makes me a little mad. Like, I've been a Christian for a long time. My whole life, I've never strayed away. I've always walked the straight and narrow. And are you telling me, God, that you get more excited about somebody that's been far from you? And he goes, yeah, I kind of am. That's the nature of a shepherd, and I'm a shepherd, by the way. And I care for all my sheep. And if one is lost, I'm going after the one. And you could argue with him and go, yeah, but Jesus, is that like fiscally responsible? I mean, you got like 99 still. And by the way, are you just leaving them in the field? Or are you going to pen them up? And we'll get really bogged down in the story. And he goes, listen, the point of the story is this. I am a good shepherd, and I love all of my sheep, all of them. And if one gets lost, it matters enough to me to go get it. And when it's found, when the person is found, there's no lecture, right? There's no, now sit down in this chair and you listen to me. Do you understand what you did? Do you understand how wrong it was to go out there that far? Do you understand how worried sick I was? None of that. Let's have a party because we found the one that was lost, and that's all that matters. If that's how a shepherd on earth works, and I am the good shepherd, the best shepherd, the heavenly shepherd, then it certainly works even better at that level. And what Jesus does is he takes this huge idea and he lowers it down to a level that everybody can see what he's talking about. And everybody can understand, and even to a certain degree that everybody can feel. Why? Because it's ordinary. And so what I don't want to do now is spend the next 5 minutes pulling apart Jesus' story, but rather talk about the reality that that story is just like your story, and that you and I are living parables. All of us. No matter what your job is, no matter what your lot in life is, what your socioeconomic level is, you are a living parable. If Jesus chose the most run-of-the-mill job in the world to highlight one of the most life-giving truths about God, then why wouldn't he use you and yours? You see, the problem is we're trying to write the story ourselves. We're trying to apply the story ourselves. We're trying to find the meaning in the story ourselves. And I think we need to worry more about what's in the story, and then Jesus will get at what does the story mean. You see, I think we need to start trusting God to shape the story. I don't know how he's applying mine. We may not know this side of eternity how he's applying our stories, but we need to trust him to shape it in a way that's going to point to him. What we need to get better about is being content in the story that we've been asked to live out, so that he can point to us one day and go, see that? that life says something about me. What we've got to stop doing is going, here's what my life is going to be about. And here's what it all means. And we're the authors. No, we're not. We're the actors. We're the participants. And the better we get at trusting him, the more meaning we start to find in these ordinary kinds of days. And that severe everydayness becomes an opportunity to be used. For God to point at our life and go, see, let me tell you something about faith. Let me tell you something about mercy. Let me tell you something about grace. Let me tell you something about love. Let me tell you something about me. Because reality, Christians, the reality is right now, we're the closest thing to Jesus the people got. So your life is teaching them something about him. What a privilege that is. And if that's the case, then there's not one moment in any of your day or days that doesn't matter, that isn't meaningful. Whether it's scrubbing a floor or vacuuming a car out or pushing a stroller down the road or building a skyscraper or being a pastor or being a teacher, whatever the case may be, there's no wasted moment in that. Because you're a living parable that's teaching something about God to the rest of the world. I love this quote by Dallas Willard. He says, "We must accept the circumstances we constantly find ourselves in as the place of God's kingdom and blessing." He says, God has yet to bless anyone except where they actually are. Isn't that awesome? We think, I got to go chase my blessing. I got to go find my blessing because it's buried out in a field somewhere. And God goes, no, it's already there. It's already there because I'm going to use you to teach something. I'm going to apply your story. Your ordinary, just like everybody else, grown-up life is a story that God is telling. The problem for me, I won't speak for you, but the problem for me is that I got used to the extra. And if you get used to the extra in the extraordinary, it just becomes ordinary. And here's how I know this has happened in my life. Every once in a while, I get to meet somebody that I've never met before from a place that isn't here, and they'll ask me, where are you from? And I'll say, oh, I'm from Chicago. And they go, oh, really? What neighborhood? Like, actually, it's a far north suburb, but it takes like 50 minutes to get there. So I don't really live in Chicago. But I live in this town called Gurnee, and they're like, Gurnee, isn't there a great America in that town? Yes, there is a great America in that town. That must be awesome to live in a town with great America in it. I'm like, yeah, actually, I live like a half a mile from great America. And they're like, oh, I would die to live in that close to great America and be able to go there whenever I want. And I'm like, really? Causes a lot of traffic. And it's noisy. And my dog hates the fireworks. And I live here. I'll tell people this. I live here. I have not been to Great America in 5 years. Because I got used to the extra. The vast majority of people do not have a world-class amusement park in their yard. So they think it's extraordinary. But I got used to the extra. So it's just ordinary. Doesn't mean it's not special. And for your life, here's the reality. Moms, you might think that's real ordinary. But I know a lot of people who look at your life and they say that's extraordinary. That's amazing that you get to do that. I wish I could do that. I wish I could be that. But we get used to the extra, and so this is just the thing we got to do. Guys, the days that we're grumbling about having to cut the grass, fix the leak in the gutter, whatever the case may be, these things that we got to do at our house, do you know how many people around the world look at you and go, you are so Lucky. Because the leak in my roof comes through the tarp that's being held up by sticks, right? Like, it's something so relative about it. And those of us that are in friend circles where it's a lot of time investment and energy investment, I can introduce you to some people who would go, I'd like die to have some friends that close to me. But we get used to the extra, so it just becomes ordinary, and when it becomes ordinary, we think it doesn't matter or have meaning or it isn't special anymore. And there are people around the world and a God in the universe that looks at your story and goes, but it's my story. And if you would just embrace that and accept that and be content in that and show up in that, I could use it. I could apply it in ways that you can't even imagine. Because you are a living parable. Your story is the story that Jesus is going to tell so that people will understand who he is. But just like every other part of this series of talks that we've been kind of working our way through, we have to decide to see things this way. It is not a wait and it'll hit you kind of thing. You have to make a conscious decision on a very regular basis to live life this way. And so here's what I'm going to encourage us to do for the next 15 days. I'm going to call it the 15-day challenge. I'm going to challenge you to notice the most mundane parts of your life. And with each of those mundane parts, I'm going to ask you to think through, what is cool about this? What does this say about God? Or what does this say about me in God's eyes? And we're just going to notice these things, and here's how I want you to notice them this week. Take a picture. Like, let's not be afraid of the technology that we have in our pockets. You have world-class cameras in your pocket. So take pictures of, like, normal things. Like, how about this? When you turn the faucet in your sink on and clean, fresh water comes out of it, take a picture of that. And then give a cool caption that kind of helps people understand why you're doing this, and then put this hashtag. And for some of us, we're like, what's a hashtag? That's a pound sign. It's a way for us to kind of communicate with each other because there's so many people on social media. Use this hashtag #NotMundane15. The 15 is for 15 days, and here's what's 15 days from today, Memorial Day. So between now and Memorial Day, every day, at least once a day, I want you to capture something mundane and apply it and look at it as, wow, God has blessed me, or this is true of God. Play Jesus. I know that sounds weird, but he looked at shepherds and sheep and went, there's something about me in this. So you look at the normal parts of your life and go, there's something about God in this. And I'm going to share this with people because here's the reality. There are going to be days where I struggle to see things this way. But if I jump online and I see all of you noticing this stuff, for one, it's going to encourage me. And two, it's going to inspire me to start seeing it. And what if we just started inspiring people to be grateful and content and see the extraordinary and the ordinary every single day of their life? People are going to come up to you at work and they're going to be like, I noticed on your Facebook or on your Instagram that you're posting like things nobody cares about, but you think they're special. Why? And you can start to tell them. Because my story matters to God, and even the most mundane parts of it point to him. So what if we lived our life like that for just 15 days? I'm not asking the rest of your life, because you might do this and go, I don't like this. This is too happy-go-lucky. You can give it up. But 15 days together as a community, we look for the parts of our story that are the parable Jesus is teaching the world. It'd be really cool. Because reality is, you and I are a living parable. And here's how we're going to encourage you to do this every day, because, I forget things. In a minute, our ushers are going to come down the aisles, and they've got a cup. And they're going to hand the first person that cup, and in the cup are a bunch of seeds, sunflower seeds. Don't eat it. What I want you to do is take one seed and put that in your pocket. and keep it in your pocket every day for the next 15 days. And every time you put your hands in your pocket and you feel that seed, it should spark, I got to find the extraordinary today. I got to look for that. Because we're doing that thing as a community together. I got to remember to do that. Why a seed? Because from that tiny little ordinary seed that you would walk by 100 times a day and not think twice about comes one of the most beautiful, incredible plants on planet Earth. This extraordinary thing. I mean, have you ever seen a sunflower? They're amazing. It's all contained in that ordinary little shell that looks a lot like every other seed. But God puts extraordinary things in ordinary vessels. You and I are pretty ordinary, but we are image bearers of the most extraordinary. What a privilege. Let's make sure the world sees it. Let's make sure that people understand just how amazing our God is and the life that he gives us is. So the ushers are going to come down. You guys can start coming, or they're going to pass those out. I'm going to pray for us, and we're going to sing a song in just a couple minutes that mentions, kind of in passing, if you're not paying attention, you'll miss it, but it talks about this idea of leaving the 99 for the one. And my hope is that as we sing this, you really begin to contemplate this idea and not just agree with it from an intellectual, cognitive standpoint, but you really start to feel it. That each of us in one way or another are the one sheep that God pursued and found and celebrates, right? Like that's us in the story. And then what I want you to do is start going, my life is full of those kinds of truths if I just look for them, if I just see them. You know, one of the things that I've been thinking about in doing this, and then we'll wrap up, and I'll get out of here. We're told in the Bible that we should pray without ceasing. That's really hard to do. I mean, have you ever tried to pray all day without stopping? It's really hard. But what if praying without ceasing has a lot more to do with us just being conscious of the presence of God? And maybe this exercise, I hope, will provide that for you. Where all day you're just searching for it and you're being more conscious of it. And that you'll come back in a week and go, wow, my life isn't so mundane. My life isn't so ordinary. It's actually pretty amazing. I just didn't know to look for it. I just didn't know to be conscious of it. And maybe you'll get to the place where you go, my life it's a living parable. Will you pray with me? God, we probably need to apologize first. Because you have been writing this amazing story in each of our lives. And we've probably written more of it off as ordinary and mundane than we should have. Because you don't do any of it on accident. And then we see how you took things like shepherds and coins and sons, and you use those things that we take for granted as examples of how amazing you are. And I bet, Jesus, that when everybody walked away from that teaching that you gave, a lot of people went, I never thought of it like that. Or I didn't know that it meant something like that. That is my prayer for each of us this week, is that we'd go around our lives going, I never thought of it like that. I never knew it meant something like that. Help us to see you in our most mundane moments. And in each of our stories, help us to see you the whole way through, how you've been present and how you've been teaching and speaking into our lives all along. And as we sing this song, God, it's a celebration in a lot of ways, of the truth that was contained in that shepherd chasing down that sheep. Will you make it stick in our hearts, in our minds this week? Amen.